Today we will be dividing decimals. So let's take a look at our first problem. It's 44 and 22 hundredths divided by negative 6 and 7 tenths. So my first step is to change it so that the divisor is a whole number. So this is our divisor, negative 6 and 7 tenths. So I'm going to move that decimal over one space. That's like multiplying by 10. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to move it over one space. Because if I multiply the divisor by 10, I would need to multiply the dividend by 10. And from this point, I can now do the division. So I do negative 67 into 442 and 2 tenths. So the first thing with division is figure out what kind of sign you have. Well, it's a negative and a positive divided by a negative. So I'm going to make this quotient, which is the answer to the division problem, a negative. And then I'm also going to bring up that decimal. So those are the two important things. Make sure you get the sign right and get the decimal in the right spot. Now we're going to try the division. So 67 doesn't go into 4, doesn't go into 44, so the first number is going to go right above the 2. And so as I do this, instead of thinking of 67 into 442, I'm going to take that 67 and I'm going to cross off just the 2 and the 7 and think of 6 into 44. Well, it does go in there 7 times, however, that makes 42, and that's pretty close to the number, so I'm going to go with the next number smaller. I'm going to go with a 6 instead. So I'm going to put a 6 up here, and I'm going to go ahead and multiply the numbers. 67 times by 6. And so I go ahead and do that work. I get 42, carry a 4. 6 and 6 make 36, plus 4 makes 40. So now I've got that number. I can go ahead and do the subtraction. So when I do that, I get 42 left over, and I bring down this 2. Don't worry about the decimal point. That just helps us figure out where the quotient, decimal point, and the quotient goes. Now look at the number that you have here. So I brought down this. This should be a 0 instead of a 2, because 2 minus 2 makes 0. So I have 402 here. Notice that that's the same number we got when we did 6 times 67. So sometimes you can just look at the number that you had prior, and you don't have to actually go through and figure out what that value is, because sometimes the answer is staring you right in the face. So in this case it is. So we have 6 and 6 tenths, and that's negative when we go ahead and do the division. So negative 6 and 6 tenths is the way we read that number. Well, same thing over here. What we need to do first is move the decimal over in the divisor 2 spaces. So do the same thing here. So it moves over 2 spaces and it goes right there. So we're doing 85 into 5,652 and 5 tenths. So when I say the decimal point, or when I get to the decimal point, I say the word and, because this is the whole number and this is the fraction portion that we have. So I'm starting with 85, not into 5, doesn't go into 56, so I have to do 85 into 565. And so I do the same thing I had done before. So instead of thinking of 85 into 565, I think of just 8 into 56. Well, it goes exactly 7 times, but that would be too big. See, if I did 7 times 85, it would give me something bigger than 565. So I'll go with the next number smaller. I'm going to go with a 6. So I'll put the 6 right above this 5, because I'm doing 85 into 565, and I go ahead and do the multiplication. So off to the side, 85 times by 6, let's see what we get. We get 30, carry a 3, that makes 48, plus the 3 makes 51, so 510. So we do the subtraction, and I have 5 minus 0 is 5, 6 minus 1 is 5, and I bring down the 2. Now, as I said before, always look at the number that you had before. Rather than thinking of 85 into 552, see, we just did 85 times 6, and that made 510. And that is pretty close to the 552. So let's use that same number again. See, rather than having to do the division, I looked up and I saw what I needed. And I go ahead and do the subtraction, and I'm left with something that's smaller than 85. I got 42, so that's the right number. So now we have to do 85 into 425. So I do the same thing as before. When I think of the number, I'm going to cross off the 5, cross off this 5, and think of how many times does 8 go into 42? Well, it goes in there 5 times, so let's try it. Let's try a 5. And so I do the multiplication, I get 25, This makes a 40 plus 2 makes 42, so it worked. So there it is, 66 and 5/10 is our quotient. And it's positive because we're dealing with two positives. Well, taking a look at our next one here, we've got a 734 and 8/10 divided by negative 1 and 67/100. So we've got to move the decimal 2 spaces. This one 2 spaces, that means I need to add a 0. So I'm doing negative 167 into 73,480, and the decimal point goes right at the end. So it's always important to make sure you get the decimal point in the right spot in the quotient. So always get that, and I also get the sign as well figured out. So I know it's a negative because I'm dealing with one negative. So now I start the division. So 167 is going to go into 734. So I do the same sort of thing. I think of, this case, I'm thinking of just 1 into the 7. Well, it goes in there 7 times, but that would be too big. 5 times would actually be a little bit too big too, and we're going to go with a 4. Because remember, I'm doing 4 times 167, which is almost 200. So you could almost do that. You could round this up to 200 and think of this as 800, and you see how if I cross off these two zeros and these two zeros, 2 goes into 8 4 times. So that's why I went with 4 rather than something closer to 7. So let's go ahead and multiply 4 times 167. So I go ahead and do that multiplication. I get 28. 24 and 2 make 26. And 2 and 4 make 6. So 668. So now I can do that subtraction. Now you got to borrow a bunch of times. So this 13 is going to change to a 12. And we do the subtraction, and we've got 66. And I'll bring down that 8. And look back up. Don't just start thinking of 167 and a 168. Look back at what you just did. We just got 168. So that must mean the next number has to be 4. And we do that subtraction, we're left with 0, but you're not done. You see, you still have another place. That's why we have to be really careful as we do division. We've got to line up the place values that we're dealing with here. And so I still have this one more 0 that I need to have a placeholder in. So negative 440 is the answer. Well, the next problem is Freddie used 6 7/75 gallons of gas to drive 155 2/25 miles. What is the car's mileage? Mileage is miles per gallon. How many miles did he go for every gallon he used? So that's going to be 155 2/25 miles per 6 7/75 gallons. So when we go ahead and do the division, what we have to do first is move that decimal over. So I moved the decimal 2 spaces to the right, so basically just multiplying by 100. So when I do the division, I'm doing 675 into 15,525. So as I look at the number, I'm thinking of 675 into not 155, but 1,552. Again, the decimal point's at the end of the number, so I need to make sure I bring that up. So again, it's 675 into 1552. Well, as I look at that, again, you could cross this, you could think of this 675 as pretty close to 700. So 700, and then this 1552, I'll just leave it like that. Think of just 7 into 15. Well, that only goes in there 2 times. So that's the number I'm going to start with. And it's got to go right above this 2 here, because I'm doing 675 into 1,552. So when I do that multiplication, 675 times by 2, I get a 10, carry the 1, that makes 15, carry a 1, that makes 13. And so I rewrite that number, 1350, and do the subtraction. I'm left with 202. Now I've got to bring down the 5, and now we do one more. So same sort of thing. Think of how many times does 700 go into, and then let's go ahead, and since I rounded 700 up, if I round this number up, it'd be, even though it's not rounded properly, it'd be about 2100. Well, if you cross off the zeros, 7 goes into 21 3 times. So let's try it. Let's see if it works. 3 times by 675. So 3 times 5 makes 15. 3 times 7 makes 21, plus 1 makes 22. 3 times 6 makes 18, plus 2 makes 20. So it does end up working out. And so our answer is 23. 23 miles per gallon is our answer. And the next one here, it says that the members of a book club met at a restaurant for dinner. Total bill was, and then it gives the total bill, and they shared the bill equally. And each person paid $12.55. So how many members were there? Well, we're going to divide 1255, so I'm moving that decimal over 2 spaces. Do the same thing here. I'm dividing it into 11,295. Decimal point goes at the end. Now this is an even number. There can't be a half of a person, so I know it's going to end up going there evenly. So let's try this. Let's try think of this as 1255 into, I got this 11,295. So let's go ahead and cross off these two numbers right here. These three, well actually let's just cross off these two numbers right here. Let's cross off these two numbers. How many times does 12 go into 112? Well, 12 times 9 makes 108. So let's try 9. Let's try 9, because way at the end of the number, because I'm doing 1255 into this 11,295. So I do the work, and that makes 45. Carry the 4. 45 and 4 make the 49, and that makes 18, and 4 make the 22, and 9 and 2 make 11. So that does end up working out evenly. So 9 people are in the club. And the next one talks about Fran has a plank of wood, and it's 4 65 meters long. She wants to know how many pieces that are this long, 85 fit or can be made out of it. Well, let's move that decimal over, and let's do some division. 85 into 465. Well, 85, how many times does 8 go into 46? Well, 8 goes into 46. We have 8 goes into 46 5 times, and it could almost be 6, but that would make 48, so that'd be a little bit too big. So we end up with a 25, and that makes 42, and we have something left over. But remember, how many pieces of wood can she cut? How many pieces of wood that are that length? Well, we have a decimal, but it doesn't matter what this part is, because this is just a part of one piece. And so I can't go any more than that. So I just have 5 pieces of wood that we can make out of that, out of a length of 85 meters. And our last problem is a 2-step problem. First of all, it gives us that a box of nails has 500 nails that weigh this amount, 1 35 kilograms. He uses 60 nails to build a birdhouse. How much do the nails in the birdhouse weigh? So we got to find out how much one nail weighs. So I want to know how many kilograms for one nail. One nail. So that means I need to put kilograms on top, nails on the bottom. So that means I've got 1 35 kilograms over 500 nails. So I need to divide 500 into 1 35. Well, the divisor is already a whole number. I do not need to move it. So I bring the decimal point straight up, and I have to add a 0 because 500 doesn't go into 135, but it does go into 1,350. So I have to add some placeholders here so I can put the number right above the 0. And then I think of 5 into, I'll add those 2 zeros for now. So I'm thinking of just 5. Cross off the 2 zeros, cross off the 5 and the 0. How many times does 5 go into 13? Well, just 2 times. So let's put a 2 there. I know that makes 1,000. I do the subtraction. I'm left with 350. Well, I add the 0, and 5 goes into 35 7 times. So that makes 3,500. So I have a remainder of 0. So there it is. 27 10,000ths. 27 10,000ths kilograms per nail. And so now we have 60 nails. So we need to multiply by 60 nails. So 60 nails. And I get those nails to cancel. This will give me the amount of kilograms. So all I have to do is multiply 6 times 27 is the main numbers I need. Then I'll figure out where the decimal goes. So 6 times 7 makes 42. And 6 times 2 makes 12 plus 4 makes 16. So now I need to figure out where the decimal goes. Well, here I'd actually add a 0 because I've got that 0 there. And I need to move the decimal back 4 spaces. So back 1, 2, 3, 4. So there it is. So my answer is 162 thousandths kilograms. The way I've got it written is 1,620 10,000ths of a kilogram. Well, that's the homework you're going to see tonight. Good luck.